everyone? It's That Nerd Ryan here, and I'm a little offset. There we go. Today we're going to be talking about The Nun 2. So this is the sequel that I didn't even know was happening until about 2 weeks ago. And then it came out, and I could see why there was no advertising in it. So we're talking about the darkest chapter in the Conjuring universe. And no, not Annabelle. No, not Annabelle Creation. No, not Annabelle Comes Home. No, not the first Nun. No, not Conjuring The Devil Made Me Do It. No, not Curse of La Llorona. The darkest chapter. And no, none of those. Damn, why do they keep saying everything's the darkest chapter in the Conjuring universe? I just wanted to mention that. Every new movie that takes place in the Conjuring universe is the darkest chapter. This one, though, is either actually the darkest chapter or the second darkest compared to Annabelle Creation. And what I mean by that, and this is kind of weird when you think about it, this is one of only two Conjuring universe movies, maybe three, actually three, I forgot about La Llorona, but we always try to, where the main spirit actually murders someone. In the Conjuring movies, the only time somebody is to die is Conjuring 3, Devil Made Me Do It. And that's debatable if it was actually a spirit or not, because it was a witch. The first Annabelle and the third Annabelle, no one dies. The first movie, the only people that die are the nuns that basically killed themselves. And I believe there is a death in La Llorona. I do want to say, though, The Nun 2 has a ton of comparisons to Annabelle Creation, about like having a bunch of young schoolgirls together. In Annabelle Creation, it was orphans, and this one, it was a boarding school. Having the demon split up its work between somebody that's possessing it itself, or creating something to use, and like stuff like that. I will say Valak is more menacing in this, and has more frightening scenes, because she actually does stuff in this. She does stuff through Maurice and through her own actions. There is some stuff that happens in this that really ruined the movie for me, but there's also some really cool and good stuff in this. I did kind of already mention spoilers when I was talking about the comparisons with Annabelle Creation, so I am going to give the 100% spoiler warning now, because we're going to go ahead and talk about the story. But honestly, this movie was not advertised well, and honestly is kind of passable. The only thing that it really sets up is something that I hope they don't use in Conjuring 4 or any Conjuring sequel after this. They kind of did this in the first movie too, but it was more realistic, quote-unquote, sort of thing. This one, the MacGuffin, was just kind of stupid. So in the first movie, they used the blood of Christ to defeat Valak, like the actual blood of Christ. They do use the blood of Christ again against Valak in this. However, it is wine that they prayed on. In the first movie, it's the actual blood of Christ. In this one, they use the eyes of Saint Lucy. They use literal eyes that somehow were magically bestowed on them when they became holy items. That is not explained well, because it says that it can help defeat the demon, but it also can make the demon stronger. So, how do you know how to make sure that you're using it correctly? And the logic I use is, how can an unholy creature touch a holy item? Doesn't make sense. It's like ice trying to touch fire. That sort of thing. That whole aspect really ticked me off. The other aspect is at the ending of the movie, which we'll get to. But we do have returning characters in this, which is great. We have Sister Irene, who I think is a great character. Of course, Maurice is back because he's possessed by Valak. They're the only really returning characters in this, though. We do have the new nun. I forgot her name, but she's played by basically Ellie's girlfriend from Last of Us. And she's kind of like a nun that kind of isn't wanting to keep her faith, but learns it along the way. And of course we got Valak back, and we're in France this time. This movie actually opens with Valak killing a priest, which right then and there I was like, okay, I'm liking this movie better than the first one, because literally the first one, all Valak did was just stand in the corner and not really do anything. This movie, she's actually going out there and doing stuff. And then it got to the point at the end where they kind of went back to the, I'm going to stand when they do the split up. I'm going to just scare you and stand there. There is what I consider, and like sickly so, I guess is the way to say it, because I didn't revel in this happening. It just was something that made the most sense. Was the best scene in the movie is there's this kid delivering milk, or delivering supplies, and he goes to drop off the supplies and everything, and he hears, honestly, what sounds like somebody giving head, but somebody gargling in the corner. So he peeks around the corner, and Maurice is kind of like pulling a Blair Witch, and he's standing like this, going like that. And you see Valak's hands come around the corner, and the kid tries to run away. Valak comes up, snaps the kid's neck. That made the most sense. And what I mean by that is, at the end of the movie, Irene has the eyes of St. Lucy. They have Maurice tied up all the way across the boarding school. Basically, they're about to win. Maurice gets out. Valak does send Maurice to retrieve the eyes, but also then goes, okay, there's some girls just walking around. I'm gonna scare them. Why? One, they have nothing to do with what's going on, really. I mean, besides them being in the building. And two, when you've proven that you can literally just walk up, and then why are you wasting your time just, oh, I'm gonna scare you? Like, this isn't it, where I'm going to eat you, and you being scarier makes you tastier. This is just, I'm just gonna scare you. Have fun. That sort of thing. So that really bothered the ending for me. That involving a mystical item. What my understanding was the Conjuring universe is supposed to be, quote unquote, realistic paranormal horror. And obviously, I do believe in that kind of stuff, but I never believe it to the extent of how The Conjuring goes. But you do set rules of, there are spirits, they can attack people, they can be seen, this and that. But you never go in again, talking about for the movie, God is real, so you establish that God protects them, but there's these evil spirits and stuff like that. I don't know where God protects me goes to, God made these Covenant of the Lost Ark relics lying around that could beat demons. That gets a little too fantasy sci-fi for what the story entails. So I think that, like, The Nun bringing in the blood of Christ in the first movie, I think, was just enough to where, like, it doesn't cross that line. But then bringing in this magical item, especially when you show that in other movies, and I think in this movie too, just showing a cross harms an evil spirit. But then you're like, okay, yeah, Eyes of St. Lucy, now it goes over to that. So that really bothered me. But I do want to talk about some positives with this movie too. One of the major positives that I think this movie has is, even though there is a lot of jump scares in this, I was actually thinking about this like while I was getting prepared to shoot this. Jump scares in horror films are very unnecessary. The best way to make a horror movie is ambiance and surrounding. This movie gives you the uneasy ambiance throughout majority of the scenes. Obviously, there's some scenes where like nothing scary is going on and you know nothing scary is going to happen. But there's some scenes where nothing scary happens and you feel that something's going to pop up. So, for example, there's a scene where the main little girl is looking at a mirror and getting explained this game about, it's like the devil's game. Certain point in the day, the sun shines through this painting, this like the church painting, and it'll hit a red spot, and if the red spot's lit up, you have to stare at it. And that whole scene feels like if she turns around or something, Valak's gonna be right there. And I could swear I'm probably wrong, but it does feel that there is a single frame where you see Valak's face right next to her. But I could be wrong. Which also brings me to the next point in this. This film has a lot of the phenomenon of pareidolia in it. What the phenomenon is this is like a real life thing, whether or not you believe in spirits or demons or anything like this. This is a real life phenomenon that is backed by science and everything. It's actually like a defense mechanism for humans, that we see faces in inanimate objects and stuff like that. So a lot of this movie has moments where you could swear you see Valak standing somewhere or just off a frame, and it's like literally like a coat hanger. Or I think the best example is there's a part where I think there's like a white like drape like just in the background out of focus, and like they never bring like a dress to it or anything like that, and it's like, oh my god, she's standing right there, and it's not, and like stuff like that. Now again, there are jump scares in this movie. I don't think they're necessary. Actually, like one scene where the pages are flying through, it's in the trailer and everything, and as I walked into the theater, they're talking about that scene in like a podcast. That scene was scary enough where just the pages were flipping and everything, and it turned into the shape of Valak. That was scary enough, but it kind of got ruined with like Irene walking closer and all of a sudden that. Like, it doesn't need to have that happen. It's just freaky that, okay, that means she's here watching me. And at any moment I could turn and she's standing there. And you don't even have to have her stand there. Another thing that I don't understand, I can't remember if they did this in the first movie or not. I don't know why they keep reusing Valak's introduction scene in The Conjuring 2. There is literally a part where the main little girl is walking around and she goes upstairs. All of a sudden she opens the door and it's the Warrens' house hallway with Valak standing at the end. And then they kind of hint at the end of the movie that did happen in the first movie too. I get that scene is honestly a very scary scene and a great introduction. I don't see the point that they have to keep reusing it in every movie. And they do that a lot in this movie too. Like, when Maurice starts really showing that he's being possessed and everything, one of the paintings morphs into Ed Warren's painting of Valak, which does not make sense, because this is like 10, 20 years before The Conjuring 2. But yeah, it shows up and it literally does go back. Sorry, you're going to see a figure that's going to get reviewed in a few weeks, but it does go back to her like going like that and rushing at them. And it's like, okay, that's reused. So there is a lot of reused, recycled stuff in this movie that I do think was kind of unnecessary. But there's also some really cool original stuff, like the flipping pages and everything like that. The ending as well, it's one of those, if you know, it's sad, but if you don't know, it's happy sort of meme. So Maurice lives happily ever after, with basically implying that he's going to be staying with the main little girl and her mom, and they're going to be a family. If I remember 100% correct, which I'm pretty sure I do, it does reveal at the end of the first Nun movie that Maurice's exorcism is the one that they're showing in the first Conjuring movie. If I remember that whole scene correctly, Ed mentions that Maurice killed his wife and daughter, or wife and kids, something along that line. I could be misremembering it, but that would mean that the people he's happily walking off with do not have a happy ending, which is very sad and depressing. That also kind of sets up that there's probably going to be a Nun 3, because Valak is still in Maurice. We're still attached to Maurice. Also, I do want to say they defeat Valak by throwing wine on her, claiming it as the blood of Christ, which is fine. That was kind of something established at the beginning of the movie. But Valak lights on fire and explodes as if she's never going to return, which we know is not true. So the Nun 3, if they make it, is going to have to do some stupid explaining to her coming back, which doesn't make sense to me. Anyways, it ends with Maurice and everybody walking off happily, and then we get a post-credit scene of the Warrens getting a call and saying that they're on their way. It doesn't really clarify if it's like post-Conjuring 3 or pre-Conjuring 1, if it's them facing, like, the first time facing Valak as in exorcising Maurice, or if it's going to be whatever the final rite is, which is the name of Conjuring 4, by the way. I just found that out the other day. But yeah, so honestly, I'm going to have to give The Nun 2 a 5 out of 10. Did not really enjoy it. I do want to say, really quick, I did have something happen during the movie that was very unsettling and kind of scary, but it was my own fault. It wasn't anything supernatural, but it was very, very creepy. So I went to the restroom about 45 minutes into the movie. I did actually accidentally see this in IMAX, not knowing that I got tickets for IMAX. But I went to the bathroom, and then I walked into the theater next to the one that I was supposed to be going into. And they weren't playing anything at the time or anything. However, they were playing the most ominous, creepy music ever. Like, it felt like maybe this was supposed to be an advertisement where they'd have somebody jump and scare you for walking into the wrong theater. But, like, so the theater was dark, like, lights off, everything. The screen was black. So I'm walking in and I just hear, like, almost like music that you think would be in The Nun. So I'm like, oh, okay, it must be just a really creepy scene, like the lights are out or something. They're going to turn it on and she's going to be standing there. Whatever. And then I look and there's nobody in the theater. Mind you, there's probably about 2 people in my theater, maybe 4. So, like, it literally took me about a minute of being like, I'm in the wrong theater. But I was getting goosebumps and everything because I was like, okay, this is really creepy. But, yeah. So, anyways, that was the scariest thing that happened in my experience with The Nun 2. But yeah, so I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Be sure to leave a like, comment, subscribe, ring that bell, and follow me on all my social media down below. It's that Nerd Ryan.